In this video, I'll cover my custom resource assets for Substance Painter, beginning with an overview of their intended use in the context of a production look-dev workflow, followed by a demo showing that workflow in action. The place to start is by selecting the project template in the new project window. This will load a whole bunch of settings geared to an optimized workflow. And the first of these we'll look at are the display settings. So you can see here that I have in the environment map this 360 panoramic HDR loaded in. And this corresponds to what we have in Maya. Basically, the Maya turntable lighting environment has been rendered into a 360 panoramic HDR image, which is used here in Substance Painter to light the scene. This means we can view our asset in the same lighting environment in both programs. The second thing that we need to do is to get the shader settings to be the same in the two programs. For that, we have the Uber Shader Smart Material. Unlike many smart materials which come with a pre-built look, the intent of my Uber Shader is to give artists a solid starting place from which to begin creating their own look. And the shader is made up of 4 groups: the NoOp, the color, the spec, and the bump. Let's begin with the NoOp sliders. Substance does not have a set attributes for a shader the way that Maya does, so we need a way to create these. And because these are just uniform values or colors, there's no need to export them as maps. And actually this would be a disadvantage because it means the shader attribute slider would be locked off when the texture map is connected to it, meaning that we would lose the ability to adjust the slider in Maya. And we never want to have a program take control away from the artist. So what we want to do is be able to set the shader attributes the same way in Maya and Substance, so our asset will look the same in both programs. This can be done in Substance with fill layers, which retain the values that we set for them. Note that this is not the case for paint layers, which change based on the current brush settings. So let's go over the NoOp sliders from top to bottom, beginning with the gray temp, which is also called isolate bump. This is a toggle. You'll see that it's off by default, and if I turn it on, it puts a gray color over everything. And the idea is to isolate the bump. So if I have, in this example here, I've got this really loud dominant color texture, which when it's applied, you really can't see what the bump is doing at all. And so it's really helpful to be able to just turn off the color and just see the bump in isolation so you can make sure that's doing what you want. And so this is a thing that enables you to be able to do that. Next up is we have a toggle for the subsurface scattering amount, or SSS. So just turn this on, and you can see here that I'm getting subsurface scattering on my object. You can also adjust the scattering amount. It's set to 1, but if that's too much and looking unrealistic, then you can adjust that to get to have lower values. Again, this is just with the intention of getting your settings to be parallel with what you're doing in Maya. Next up, we've got disable spec, which is again an on-off toggle. So if I click this, the spec goes away, and turn it off and the spec is back. This is again the same principle as isolating the bump. You want to isolate out just the diffuse color. And this is a parallel to what you would do in Maya as well. If you just went over to the specular weight and knocked it down, there you can see that in isolation. Next we have the spec amount. This is again a slider. It's by default set to 0.5, which is parallel to what I use as a common starting place with an Arnold standard surface shader, or really any BRDF shader. Again, the idea is to simply have the availability of the sliders in Substance Painter so that you can set them to be equivalent to what you're having in Maya, so you can have your asset look the same in the two programs. Finally, we have the metalness, which is again a toggle. This is a parallel to toggling it on in Maya as well. And I mentioned this being a toggle, black or white, because in the real world, a material is either metal or it's not metal. There's no such thing as 30% metal. And the only reason that you would make something somewhere in the middle is for some kind of non-physically based artistic purpose. And all of these things here in the NoOps, none of this is going to export, and we don't need it to export. This is just about a way to set sliders, to allow ourselves to basically move the sliders around like we would in Maya, to set them how we like them. And then we come into Maya, and all we're going to be doing is applying the texture maps. We're going to have three that we're going to be exporting. We're going to have the color, and we're going to have the bump, and we're going to have masks. One place we're going to have the masks would be in the roughness. If you want to define different regions for the roughness, there's a video that I have specifically about a better way to do roughness in Substance Painter, and this is sort of the implementation of that here. You can watch that video for more details. All right, let's take a look at the color section. We've got a fill layer here. You can take a texture map that you have and put it into there. We've got the paint layer where you can paint some color. Paint whatever you want onto there. Here I have a fill with a mask. Go into the mask layer, paint, and then this will reveal the fill color that I have here. Then I have the darken or lighten or burn and dodge tools, which emulate the burn and dodge tools in Photoshop. And the idea of that is that you have a mask here, and you have the uniform color set to 1, and then you just darken it up, and to control how much it's darkening, you can go to the opacity and set that low, and then you get like really subtle stuff that you can just kind of like gradually add on. And the idea is that this works by darkening the color as opposed to putting black on top of it. The lighten works in a similar way with the mask, and again needs to be very subtle, but it allows you to lighten up in the same color. Finally, we have the bump map section, and we begin with just a 50% gray base, because that is the standard for bump maps as opposed to beginning with black. And then we have the fill layer. That's where you can put in a texture map. So if I, for example, go to this one here and drag it in, go to the scale, and let's repeat this, I don't know, 20 times like that. And you want to adjust it here in the opacity. Notice that I'm here in height, right? So if I'm in base color, then this does nothing to the bump map. But if I'm here into height, then it's set here to linear dodge, and it affects the height of the bump map. Over here we've got the paint, and so if I go to here and let me grab a brush, and you can just paint in whatever you want to do. And those are the three sections which are going to be generating texture maps. The bump and the color are going to be exported out with the export textures, and there's a template in here, the DF Arnold color bump, and that, as the name implies, exports out color and bump. If we go into this, you can see that it's exporting out 8-bit JPEG and a 32-bit EXR. Then for the masks, whether that is here in the color section where we're doing basically a layered shader, or here in the specular roughness section where we're creating a mask for the roughness, those are exported out using export mask to file. So with that overview of the custom tools and their use, let's take a look at putting that all into practice with a demo of going from creating texture maps in Substance Painter and then bringing them into a turntable setup in Maya with the goal of having things look the same in both programs. So I have here in my color just a nice color that I'd like to have for the paint, and I've toggled the mask so I can see it before I paint the mask onto it, but let me just untoggle that so we can see the main paint layer. And this I want to make like a metal, so I'm going to come into the color map and I'm going to add metal, and then on the color I'm going to come into the texture maps here, and I'm filtering out for grunge, and you can just sort of look through here and find something that's fun. This looks fun, so I'm going to try this one. I'm just going to drag this into the base color. So I'm going to go into here and I can take my brush and go into my mask layer here, and there I can paint away the color like this. I'll make it a little bit smaller, and I'll just take my brush. Let me go to the brushes, and I think I picked like a dirt brush. This is kind of nice. This is also nice. Let's pick this one. So, and make it a little smaller, and I'm just going to come into here and I'll be like, okay, I want it to kind of be breaking away on these parts here, and like that, and maybe up in here and down here. Make this a little bigger, and just kind of paint some stuff in like this around here, and then I can reverse it. So I go to my paint mask here, the grayscale, and I just flip it, right? And now I erase away because this is a mask that I'm painting. So I can just go in and correct anything, and then maybe I also say, okay, you know what, I want to actually change the metal. So I'm going to take this layer here, this darkened layer, and I'm going to drag it underneath this so it's not affecting the top one, and I'm gonna change my brush. I'm gonna go into here to darken, and you can see it's just darkening this up. That looks nice. And then I want to also adjust my specular on this whole thing, because the paint job is just crazy perfect and kind of ridiculous. Like, how in the world do you have such a perfect paint job here, but then these scrapes here? It doesn't really make sense. So I come into my roughness here, and I've got this secondary roughness on this, and I am going to come into this and to the paint, and go back to the dirt brush because that was really nice before. And let's see, let me make sure, come into here and make this really different. There. Okay, so now I can see what I'm getting. And then come back into the paint. And change my light around so I can kind of see what I'm getting on here. That's kind of nice. I'm going to come into here, Alt, so I can see what my map looks like, and be like, okay, well maybe I want to just come in, paint onto some areas that I missed, and then what I think I want to do is add a little more variation into it. So I'm going to try this, and I'm going to knock this down and sort of paint in more variation across here, then switch back over and look what I'm getting. So yeah, that could be nice. And then maybe on my top layer here, I can add in, well, I can take this burn here and I can duplicate it. I'm just going to do copy and then go up here and do paste, and then I'm gonna, in the darken, I'm going to delete this paint layer, and then in the mask make another one, add paint, and set this back to dirt. I don't see it doing very much, so what am I doing wrong? Maybe this? Ah, yes. Okay, let me undo that and go to my dirt, and that's way too much now, so I'm going to go to my stroke opacity and lower it down here. Generally I like to have the grayscale here be at 100% and then play around with the opacity to get nice subtle stuff. So I'm just going to kind of mess with the color here, put some variation into it. So now I need to get all of this stuff into Maya. Oh, I don't have a bump map though, so let me add a bump map just so you can see it. Alright, so I'm gonna now export the textures. I'm gonna only do it for the part that I painted, which is this guy, the camper. So that's the color and the bump. I want to also export out the masks that I've made. So I made two masks. I made one for the roughness, and so I'm going to come into this, and here again, if you do Alt, you can see what your mask looks like. And I can go right click and say export masks to file. camper mask. Let's do MSK. Maybe I should call it roof. And then version 01 dot PNG. And then I'm gonna also go to my mask here, this one, and I'm gonna go here again to this and camper mask that. I could also call it layer if that helps me to know more what it's for. And then I come into Maya. I'm gonna read in these things here. So I've got this shader here. Come to this. I'm gonna break off this connection, and actually I'm just gonna keep this connection because this is to the color, and I'm just gonna drag it over the color and come into here where I've saved out my color here, open that up. It's automatically recognizing it because of the naming convention as the right type of map. I'm going to make another map here and read in the height and go like that. Make another image and read in my roughness map. So camper rough, and then make another one and read in my layer mask like that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a layered shader. And I'm going to make two AI standard shaders. I'm going to take my color map here and drag it into this and turn metalness on. So let's name this metal, and let's name this camper paint and camper layer. I'm going to put the metal on the bottom, drag my camper shader onto the second one, and then I'm going to take my mix, which is not the roughness, but the layer, and I'm going to drag that into the mix. Right, so I'm going to disable this, so I'm seeing only the metalness. I'm going to come into my metal shader. I don't have it assigned. Okay, so assign, right click, assign. There we go. That looks like metal. Come back into my layered shader and turn this back on. And so now the metal is underneath. And then I want to put my roughness map onto the paint here. I'm going to say blend colors. I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it into the blender, and then that gives me two values here. So I'll just take out the colors on these, and so I just have two values for the roughness. And then I'm going to make a luminance node because I want to help Maya to figure out how to convert the triple channel for the blend colors into a single channel for the roughness. So I'm going to come into the roughness here, drag that into the roughness, and voila, you can see I'm already getting it in there. And I can then, just like in Substance Painter, I can move around these two sliders to adjust the values as desired, including flipping them around and doing the opposite with them if I want to.